Hi, 1, 2, check, check, check. How are you? Good morning, in case you just came. First time in Paris, glad to be here. Lovely weather, so. This one is definitely not a technical one, probably you understood that by coming here, so appreciate that. Yeah, I just want to kick off with this. This is a real screenshot from a real app review, and we get a lot of those out there in the wild. I love the app, does great, everything's perfect. It's just that, wow, how dare you price me? So we get a lot of these, and in RevenueCat we did, actually last year we did a competition on Twitter where people just sent in a bunch of those, and everybody's going through the same thing. Like, it's a great app, I love it, but why do I have to pay for it? We all know, I bet that you guys know that app development takes a lot of time and patience and sweat, hard work. It makes sense for us that people might need to pay for it, as it's software in the end, but it just kind of comes in that on the App Store or Google Play Store, you just download it, it's free, and you expect it to be free. So we get to deal with that. Well, and you're not alone. If you get this, you're not alone. Just more about being not alone. In the world right now, I believe the statistic is that there are 6.8 billion smartphones. That's a lot. They're growing 5% per year, and it keeps growing. And then also when it comes to submitting a new app, it's also like reduced friction with AI tools, Cursor, and all of that. You probably heard all about that. So this little grid represents all of the apps that are being downloaded every year. And this represents the 6% of apps that lead to a trial. So of all of the subscription apps that are intending to use subscriptions, only 6% lead to a successful trial, which means somebody is incentivized enough to show interest that they might pay at some point or cancel. You never know. Only 2% lead to a paid subscription. So out of all of those bubbles, only 2% lead to a paid subscription. And this is an Android conference, so that's what Google Play does. So that's just under 1%. So if you submit an app you want to monetize through subscriptions, if you're on Android, out of all of the downloads, less than 1%, if you had all the apps in the world, that's what you would get. So my point here is definitely not to discourage you from doing this, and then if you have an app that works and you want to start monetizing, it's not that bad, actually. It's just that you need to be careful about it. You need to think about things that other people do about it, and maybe there are some things that you can use to make it work. So the rest of this is all about that. There are some tactics out there that help introduce pricing and monetization well, non-intrusively, at the right time, and I hope to cover all of that. When it comes to trials, and I left these quite small on purpose, so don't try to read into these. What we have on the left is time from app download to trial start. And here is app trial start to cancellation. So as we see, most app developers introduce their trials on day 0. Most cancellations happen on day 0 or 1, or maybe 2. So figuring this one out is quite difficult. You don't want, you want all of this to happen, but you don't want that. How do you balance it? And yeah, I work at RevenueCat. We are software as a service, open source, that helps developers make more money. And we work on in-app payments. So we help integrate stores, we help with integrations to third-party services, measurement tools, and all of that. So as a result, we get a lot of information. So for every app that integrates their purchases to RevenueCat, we're able to see what they're doing, and we aggregate all the data. And as a result, we have nice data to share with the industry, and that's what we try to do. So we recently released a state of subscription apps report. It takes all of the information from the around 80,000 apps that are integrated with RevenueCat, and we kind of share that data about what's happening, the benchmarks. And so all of the charts that I'm using, if you're interested, you don't have to take photos. I'm going to share QR to the entire report in the end. So yeah, so how do you price it right? Well, it depends. Best answer in the world, and I could end at this, but basically there are many tactics that many different apps use, and I think what is important here is to be able to understand where you are, where you position yourself, and how you can use that positioning to monetize well. I always forget that the clicker is that way. Yeah, so when it comes to monetization, I really want to cover the context. So context meaning like where you are in this entire picture. I think it's super important because when we look at benchmarks, when we look at the best practices, it's really easy just to follow what the Strava, Duolingo, or whatever else is, like all of the winners are doing, but you integrate the same solutions and you find out it doesn't work, right? So I think what makes the decision here is the context and finding out where you are in this. And I'm going to be quite brief in this, so bear with me, it's quite important. So these are the things that we would normally look at when we think about monetization and finding out where you are. So total addressable market, imagine all of the market that like you can theoretically access. Serviceable addressable market, how many of that total addressable market you can actually service physically, and then obtainable market, so how much of that serviceable market you can obtain. I'm going to expand a bit on these because these are quite important here. So I'm going to use an example. I have a plant app that helps me nurture plants and care for them, has AI tools or something like that. That's figurative, I don't have an app like that. So total addressable market would be something like, okay, so I mentioned 6.8 billion users in the world that have a smartphone. So I kind of figure out that, okay, out of all of those users, around 10% might be able to be interested in growing plants. Okay, so that's my total addressable market. Theoretically, that's all the people I could access, right? Serviceable addressable market is a bit more precise. So while total addressable market is great when you're talking to investors, you're trying to acquire capital or things like that, it doesn't really work when you're trying to figure out your positioning. So serviceable addressable market is something that you could think of as, okay, I have limitations on my technical setup, I have limitations on my design. So thinking about my specific example of a plant growing app, I have support for a couple of languages, English, Spanish. I'm not going to be able to service Japan. They don't speak any of these. I may have limitations on certain platforms, right? So I can account for that. So kind of serviceable addressable market already kind of reduces to, let's say, 240,000 users, so a third of that. Okay, that's still a great number, right? So I think this is where it's kind of important to figure this out and try to kind of narrow it down a bit, just because when looking at this picture, you find that addressing that situation where you are with the serviceable addressable market puts you in the right spot of monetization and where you want to put yourself. So I'm going to dwell on this a bit more. Okay, a graph. X-axis, we have serviceable addressable market, so how many users you can reach with your service, and average revenue per user, so how much you're able to charge them, right? Depending on what type of solution you choose for charging them. And for that, I'm going to use an example from movies. So with movies, it's kind of the same thing. You may go wide, and you may try to address a wider market, but then you may lose yourself addressing that market, and then you get lost within the competition or things like that. And then there are niche movies and niche cinema, which cater to the audience that is heavily invested in those. So imagine a situation where you have huge markets, so your movie caters to a big audience, and they love it, so they're willing to pay for it. So that's you. You're Sam from Lord of the Rings. People keep flocking back for the franchise movies, they keep rewatching them on DVD, they keep buying the merchandise, playing the games, all of that. So you're in the right spot. Which means you have a lot of audience and you can monetize that audience well, so charge users pretty hefty. Then there's the Sam from Transformers franchise. They kind of cater to a wider audience, so they're okay with families, teenagers, grown-ups, anyone, but they weren't received that well. So the first movie had a lot of viewers, but didn't kind of get to the second or third one. Critics didn't like it, so in order to get more people in the cinemas, they needed to kind of work on marketing a lot, do flashy campaigns and all of that. You can already see what I'm trying to say here with the apps, right? This is Sam L. Jackson from the movie The Spirit from 2008. Not many people know it, and yeah, that's the point here. It's catered to a niche audience, and that niche audience wasn't even able to kind of receive it well. So they're not going to come back to it, and probably nobody really knows about it, right? And then we have her and Sam, the operating system. So for those who love the movie, they really like it. It's a niche film, of course. It's not going to cater to the big audience blockbusters, but for those who like artsy cinema, something with a deeper meaning, they will enjoy her. And those users who like it, they will be heavily invested to, cosplay and attend more follow-ups and more movies from that director and things like that. So it's the same with apps. When you're looking at serviceable addressable market, it's really important to figure out where you are. If you have situation of Sam from Lord of the Rings, you can charge the users and you can earn with more features from wider audience. If you don't have a really good value proposition and your app just is a nice to have, it doesn't solve any serious problems, then you need to work on marketing. And then if you kind of are her situation, then you have a smaller audience, but you cannot afford to go cheap on them. So you just need to kind of be brave and charge them because they're invested in that. Well, if you're Sam from The Spirit, I have something later about that. Okay, so I spoke about Sam, enough about them. There's obtainable market. So when we speak about SAM, it's all about limitations from your side. And then obtainable market kind of limits from external factors. So competition, economy, things like that. And when you kind of add that to consideration, your obtainable market kind of reduces. So you can look at SAM, you can look at SOM. That kind of is relative and helps in like short-term versus long-term strategy. But I think both of these are really important and you need to really look at them critically and be a judge to yourself because that really kind of helps you figure out where to go and where to put your strategy. Okay, enough with the theory. Examples. We have an app, Ulysses, which is a note-taking app which is specifically catering to aspiring writers and professional writers. So it's a super niche audience. The audience is heavily invested because they try to write, they try to do it every day. They are on the app all the time. So this obtainable market's really small. The app could try to become a wider note-taking app, and we know there are many of them, but instead they chose to kind of focus on that little niche and conquer it, so they're the go-to app when it comes to writers. So they don't have the scale. They cannot afford to go on volume, so instead they choose with charging the users right away. They charge significantly bigger prices than the note-taking apps, but they have the users who can support new feature development and invest into their app, kind of. And they have a clear value proposition, so they're able to differentiate themselves from the other note-taking apps, which is meant for writers, right? So with these situations where you have good value proposition, niche audience, charging steep is probably a good way to go. So this is the her situation, right? So this is the top left. And if you don't have a clear value proposition and you're not really sure if you're able to kind of go to the Lord of the Rings or Transformers side, so you either don't have a lot of marketing budget or you don't have the kind of feature set that helps you differentiate yourself in a bigger audience, you can go horizontally. So this is an example, Air Apps. It's a developer that caters to a list of different categories. So they have a translator app, a scanner app, health tracking, VPN, 50 apps in general. And what they do is basically being in the bottom left side, so smaller audiences and unclear value proposition, they are using their subscription as a way to bundle. So one subscription gets access to 50 apps, and then users are able to swap in between them, and then that hooks them up, right? So that allows them to justify the subscription, but they're still going to stay like in their bracket, which is their choice, and that works really well for them. Right, so that's all about positioning, and figuring this out is really important. I think that when it comes to figuring out when to price, how much to price, it's really important to figure out where you are in that spectrum. And yeah, super important to be judgmental to yourself in that sense. But then the next question is timing, right? So we initially spoke about trial starts and cancellations and all of that. So when to price? In subscription apps, the most prevalent situation is using a trial. So you get users on board your app. You either ask them to start a trial that converts to a paid subscription later, or you can right away ask them to pay the full price without the trial. And that is a difficult situation to kind of find yourself in, and you don't really get that many chances to change that later on, especially if you're starting with this. There's a strong case for no trial. So this is a situation for an app which remains undisclosed. It's a case that's been done with Revenue Cat, basically an app that has strong value proposition and a niche audience. So again, the Ulysses type of situation. And this developer just decided to completely get rid of trials. They get the users to download the app and they start away tell them to start paying. Well, what that does is definitely disqualifies a lot of the users who would have churned in the end. But what it does as well is gets the revenue flowing right away from day one, day zero actually. And then, yeah, that really helps also with user acquisition. So if you work on meta advertising to get users on board, that feeds the algorithm the right way, and then the algorithm doesn't get you users who would in the end churn, and just makes it a bit more precise. That gives you higher user acquisition costs because there's less users who are likely to pay, but that's fine because you just target them enough. And then, yeah, if the app has high competitive saturation and your addressable market is big, but obtainable market is small, you kind of cannot afford just to allow users to skip in between apps, so you just get them to pay right away. So definitely not something that works for everyone, but if you find that your strength is in your value proposition and you can show the user right away when they download the app that it's worth paying, then maybe that's something for you. But definitely not for everyone. So another example from the one-star reviews. If you don't have a clear value proposition and your app maybe is a bit tricky to understand right away, you might need to use the trial to your best advantage. So the trial is basically a way to get the user to be incentivized to pay at some point, but then you have the time of a week, a month, or however long your trial is, to show them the value. So you show the features, you talk to them, you engage with them, and you make sure that they use the app before they have to start paying for it. So yeah, this is another chart from the State of Subscription Apps report, and it has cancellation reasons that we received from Google Play. So whenever a user decides to cancel a subscription, they say why they did that. So you don't really have to go deep in these numbers, but what is dominating here is the dark orange and the green, which are cost-related or not enough usage. That gives you around 70%. Not enough usage, cost-related. To me, that sounds like both of those are related to value proposition. So the users are not able to understand why they should pay for your app. They're not using it enough, and they don't see like value for money, basically. So the trial period is a great time to make sure that you communicate that. And we've seen many success cases where apps are using onboarding flows, nudges, push notifications, the entire plethora of communication with the user within the app, or even outside, like through emails. That's really important to make sure that they're able to use the app. You increase daily usage on that trial period, and then that really helps. Another piece of info, so to support that, we've seen that year over year, and it's this time from right to left. So that's previous year, that's last year. The trial lengths have grown. So we've seen a decrease in the red, which is trials 3 to 4 days usually, 1 to 4. And there's a growth in the purple and the smaller ones. So instead of trials being from 1 to 4 days, they've now grown to become a week, a month in some cases. And that really kind of helps developers to communicate the value, get the daily usage on, so that when they actually get the prompt to pay and they start charging the user, they stay, because retention is super important. And another example, I love this one. So I'm an aspiring surfer. I try to surf. I live near the Baltic Sea, which doesn't have any waves, but I still try to do that. So Surfline is the main app for surfers. If you're trying to figure out waves and forecasting for waves in your region, you can just use the app. It actually works on a freemium basis, so you download it, you can use a lot of the features for free, unlimited amount of time. And then, yeah, they have a huge free user base, so all of the users basically who download, initially they are not even aware that they can pay for it. But there's a huge learning curve. So as a surfer, as you begin, you don't know how waves work, and you don't know how to read swells and wind directions and all of that. So that in the beginning is really difficult, but the app is really communicating about that. So they talk to users, they let them know how features work, they inform through videos and nudges and all of that, how wave directions are read and things like this, to make sure that they're hooked. And once they're hooked, at some point they find a situation where they need more. So for example, the free version gives you 5 days of forecast. That's great, but if I want to plan a trip to Portugal because I have no waves up there, I need more days, right? So you start paying for the premium subscription or things like that. So it's a difficult product which really requires users to understand the way it works, but once they get the perks of the free version, the premium comes at a higher value at all, completely. So if you're able to use the features on the free, premium just is a huge bonus. And that's one of the examples I wanted to kind of highlight here. Yeah, so proved value, if your value is really difficult to understand in the beginning, make sure that people can use it and are able to understand the value during the trial. That's the point here. Yeah, and one more important thing, it's about subscriptions and combination of different payment methods. or monetization methods, I guess. So at the bottom we have all the verticals, and most of them, as you can see, are using subscriptions as their main monetization source. Maybe except for gaming. Like gaming has been changing that a lot, changing the game. But as we can see, many apps are also experimenting with a mix. So even if you're running subscriptions as your main source of revenue, there's still lifetime purchases for the users who are committing right away. So if you know that a surfer has started doing it and changed their location to California, and now they're able to kind of surf every day and they'll be on this every day, they might be interested in the lifetime subscription, right? Instead of just getting the little pennies from monthly or weekly, you can just get the full amount, which is a premium. And then there's consumables as well. So instead of just getting a subscription that is reoccurring, you can introduce like coins or credits that are a variation to your kind of subscription. So imagine like gaming uses that quite a lot, where you can purchase coins which then turn into like maps or unlocking features and things like that. So this part is changing. We're seeing a growth in the other situations where there's a mix, and the mix is the most important bit here. Pricing. So we talked about when to price and charge. What the pricing has been, well, I'm not going to stay here too long, and I'm going to tell you about that in the next slide. But basically, if you're interested in this, this is year over year again, but what we're seeing is weekly prices have basically stayed flat. Monthly prices have stayed basically flat. And then when it comes to yearly, the best performing apps that are in the highest quartile, P90, they've been able to charge their users more. So meaning the apps that are doing the best, they're able to provide the value and communicate it well, they've been able to charge more year over year. But yeah, more about that. Another example. So Garmin, probably know about that. It's a health and fitness hardware company, and they have an app that goes as an extension of their hardware. So if you have a fitness watch, you can use their app to enhance the features, look at your data, BPM, and all of that. So most of their users are coming from the free tier. So it's just coming as device support, an extension of what they're already doing. But Garmin are also employing tiered monetization, meaning that they're segmenting their users depending on usage, and they're applying different communication and tactics to be able to incentivize them to pay. So for example, if we have a user who started running and he's using the watch every day, the app suggests them to buy a different watch face or new maps or any of the one-time purchases that they employ. So instead of just right away asking the user to pay the full subscription, they can get them customized to pay for the app through one-time purchases, instant value, and all of that. But then when we get to power users who are prepping for marathons, they have like huge usage and daily interactions, they have the super nice and professional full subscription. So pricing here is relative depending on where you are and what your users are doing within the app. And in previous years, we've seen that most of the apps are just looking, okay, what is the competition doing and how much should I charge for my subscription? We're seeing a diversion here where some apps are looking at tiers and what their users are doing within the app and changing their pricing based on this. So I mentioned I don't want to dwell on pricing and benchmarks because of this situation. We have so many tiers happening now. So for example, even Tinder has like 3 pricing tiers for different types of usage, which really helps them as well. So the idea here is that when it comes to pricing and how much to price, try to look at usage and try to look at different cohorts of users that are viewing your app differently and see how they might benefit from that. Clickers here. Okay, So we talked about positioning. We talked about when to try to charge users, and some tiered pricing as well. I want to look into another aspect of this. So we've so far been talking about subscriptions and being able to charge the users within the app. There's also been, of course, an old and well-known tactic of pricing the views, right? So I want to divert really quickly with an example. Again, I'm into like film, so spoiler alert. Are there any fans of Rick and Morty here? We have one, two. Okay, nice. Great, I'm on your team. So I'm watching the show Rick and Morty. It's basically Simpsons in sci-fi, if I needed to do one sentence pitch. Yeah, it's a great show, and it's like, this example is from a specific episode, so season 4, episode 1, Old Man in the Seat. It has 2 storylines, but one of the storylines is about Gloody. So this is Gloody, he stays with the family, and he wants everyone to develop an app. On his forehead, it says, "Do not develop my app," because there's something about him always wanting to develop an app. Well, finally, the dad in the family decides to develop an app. And the app is called Love Finders with 2 R's and a Z. Yeah, the app works well. It ends up conquering the world. So it's an app that works like Tinder, but it works through brainwaves and gets people to change partners every 5 minutes. And the world jumps into chaos and starts fighting each other because they cannot find a partner and the app is exhausting them and there's complete chaos. Meanwhile, aliens are stealing water resources from Earth. Okay, so the dad finally comes to senses, gets the alien Gloody to take down the app. Gloody says, "I cannot take down the app." But he has a solution. He adds a paywall, ad wall, sorry. So he starts monetizing through ads. People get angry, stop using the app, remove it, chaos averted, crisis averted, everything's going fine. And there's been a lot of jokes about that out there. Even like a show like Rick and Morty, which is not specific about apps, even has this joke in it, right? So introducing advertising in the app has been like a stigma because you're afraid that the users will start disliking the app for the very sense of it having ads. And that makes sense because we've seen many apps that employ ad networks which just plug in ugly ads in the app. They show like unwanted like casino advertising and things like that, which is understandable, right? So my idea with this section is just to try to explore some of the alternative cases or some nicer cases where advertising may work to your advantage and get your users to still love the app. So when it comes to audience monetization, the most frequent case is monetizing free users. So users download the app. You don't want to start charging them subscriptions or trials or anything like that, but you want to start getting revenue to build features or just to pay yourself some salary for the hard work on the app. So as mentioned, it's pretty frequent to start using an ad exchange, plug in some ads, and they start giving you random advertising. You get paid at the end of the month. Pretty simple. The problem, they always kind of are difficult to control. Ads can become ugly, irrelevant for the user. One case which is amazing in my idea is coming from gaming. Whoop, sorry, jumped the gun. So it comes from gaming. Instead of just showing an ad wall, you can ask users to look at it. So in some games, we have situations where you have consumables like coins, which are used to unlock maps or features. So instead of just showing an ad wall, some games are using proactive advertising viewing. So you ask the user to view the app, to view the ad, and for that they get 100 coins. They view it full screen for the entirety of the video. And that's a win-win-win situation in this case. So the advertiser is happy because they've seen 100% viewability, they will pay premium for that app and its users. It's a win for the developer because, well, money from advertising, and it's a premium because it's like fully viewed, so advertisers pay more for it. And it's a premium for the user as well because, well, they get something that they would like need to work for, like mine some coins or something. Instead, they get something like that, and it's not too intrusive. So that's probably something that you could already figure out about a consumer app, like if you have credits within the app, or if you want to show some features, like you've been working on a feature which you're not too happy to start adding a subscription for, you can start giving it to users for a limited amount of time, and they can test it in exchange for viewing an ad. Another example comes from Spotify. Not sure if you've used premium version or free, but if you're using a free version, you might have heard this, but they have this advertising option called sponsored session, where a brand can pay Spotify, and then in exchange, Spotify gives the end user 1 hour free of advertising. And just before that 1 hour, Spotify tells the user, this hour is sponsored by brand X. Another great example of where you integrate advertising, but it's not a pop-up, it's not a full screen overlay. Instead, it gives a feature in exchange for a sponsorship. And you could figure out any other way to do this. If you have any premium features that you want to get the users to test, you can just talk to a brand, and they might be interested in doing this with you. There's also like platforms to connect brands with publishers as well. And then it's not necessarily for paid users, for free users. It can be for paid users as well. So as mentioned previously, like there are many apps that are now employing multiple tiers of features or pricing. So if you have a the cheapest tier of subscriptions, and you want to get users to test some features from the mid-tier, you can get a brand to sponsor a feature for a limited amount of time. And again, win situation where user gets something to test, you get paid by the brand, and the brand gets their exposure organically. And then the last part here I want to mention is partner deals. And I'm going back to Surfline, which I mentioned earlier. I think they're doing a great job here. So they have a perk session for paid users, where as a paid user, you can open a section within the app which gives you monthly deals. So you can get a cheaper wetsuit, you can get a cheaper surf camp, or enter a raffle to go to a resort, which is for surfers. So this is for paid users only, and it comes as added value for the advanced features and subscription, all of that. Just gives additional value to the user and more usage on the app because they need to keep going here and checking. And gives a good advantage to the brand because they don't have to spend the money on acquiring the user on Facebook ads or something like that. So again, another interesting situation where we have monetizing the user without intrusive ads, and it's super relevant because it's the same target audience for the wetsuit brand and Surfline and maybe the resort as well, right? So it comes like in chorus here. Right, so quick reassessment. We talked about monetization, talking about highlighting your strengths and value proposition. So when you think about those things and when you consider your value proposition and how strong it is and where it stands in the market, that helps you monetize on time. You can rush it, you can not rush it depending on what the answer here is, and try to layer it. So it doesn't have to be yes or no, it can be yes but. And mix it up. So even if you have a subscription app and it's working, you can figure out other ways to monetize, which is not necessarily coming from in-app purchases. Yeah, and one more thing, the most important part is test it. because we've seen many benchmarks out there, many success cases. It doesn't necessarily work for everyone. I think the takeaway from this is you need to have good testing tools, good testing methodology, and good ways to do that, because only you know what works for your app, and the neighbor or the competitor cannot tell you what will work for you. So that's the most important takeaway here. And I promised you a report, so if you want 264 pages of a benchmark report, feel free to download that. And do we have any questions? Because we have 5 minutes.
Thank you for presentation. I have a question based on the, for example, data. Do you suggest showing the different pricing based on the platform? For example, charging more iOS users and less, for example, Android?
Great question. We've seen this used quite a lot. So it's not necessarily by platform. It can be by country as well. So figure out like different purchasing power in countries, different adoption of subscriptions in countries. That's also super relevant. So yes, we've seen that work in some cases. In some cases not. Again, comes to value proposition and how you position yourself, but we've seen that work, yes.
Thank you.
I have something in exchange for the question. So, treasure hunt? I have one more if you want. But you need to ask a question.
Yeah, so thank you for presentation. It was great. So what's your data about this subscription model where app basically removes ads? So you monetize user on ads, and then you basically offer subscription which removes ads. So no actual value, just hiding the ads.
Yeah, reducing friction. Yeah, that works in some cases, but again, if the value proposition is that you get less annoyed, I'm not sure if that's a super sound value proposition in the long term, right? So it's not about just getting people to pay the first time, it's about retention as well. So if you have strong value proposition and users are really interested in the app and they keep using it, they just don't like the ads, then probably a great solution. But if you bother users with tons of ads every day and they just stop seeing them after paying, well, will they keep paying after 2 months or a year? So that's probably the question to ask here. Yeah.
But do you have any data about apps? Like how many of apps in the wild do just that? Like, do you know? Like?
No, sorry about that. But we mostly get data from transactions, so in-app purchases. So I think there are quite a few resources out there which measure that. Like ad networks probably do that. So that probably would be a good source. Yeah. Scarcity of pins here. All right. Thanks for staying. Thanks for coming. Oh, we have another one. Sorry, I missed you.
Yes, sorry. Sometimes when you have an app, especially an app that is more like a tool, it is an app that the users does not use really every day, but that is really useful 1 time or 2 times a week or a month. And then you start searching for ways to get back the user more often. And one of the solutions that I heard a few years ago was gamification, for instance. But I also heard very bad things around gamification, like users just then coming back for the game instead of really using your app. Is it still something that you see apps doing today, the gamification part? And what do you think about it? Is it something that is bringing more drawbacks than advantages?
Well, I don't have data to back it up, so I don't necessarily have data to back up this question. But yes, we do see a lot of gamification out there. I think it's tied into like, what else are you doing? If it's only gamification, then users will keep coming back for that. And if you don't release new features, new perks, that were meant to get users on board, then it might be difficult to retain them in the long run as well. So I think it boils down to like constant improvements as well. So if you add the game to get users to get daily usage or weekly usage, then figure out what features you can add which supplement all of that, and maybe you can even monetize them differently. So again, if your app is using like limited amounts of like bursts of usage, then maybe try to figure out like coins as figured out before. So it's not necessarily a subscription that lasts a month, a year. It can be 1,000 coins that give you X amount of uses, right? But it's still a subscription because users have a wallet that they need to deplete. All right. Well, I think that's all. Any last calls? Well, if you're, oh, here we go.
Thanks for the presentation. Just real quick, a few years ago, it seemed like, just reading online, the general consensus was, you know, single platform indie developer apps like weren't necessarily the biggest market, right, for realistically making revenue. Do you see that most of the apps are, in this case, it's an Android conference, right? But are they, you know, multi-platform? There's a bigger picture going on, and like Garmin, right? Obviously, that's a bigger company. But do you still see those single-platform indie apps at all making significant revenue, or are they? Is it really just Android as one piece of a much larger ecosystem for those products?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. Yes, to answer bluntly, yes. Especially like with growth of Cursor and other vibe coding apps, there's a lot of adoption of just somebody shipping something really quickly, and it doesn't necessarily go to all platforms. So we're seeing independent like indie advertisers going really narrow with a really like single usage case or something like that. But then on the other side, we're also seeing growth of things like React Native, where it's really easy to publish to anywhere you want, or like Flutter, where it's also like for web and things like that. So I think it's a mixed bag of tricks, and especially like with indie developers, what we're seeing is like adoption of tools. So it's not necessarily just taking like Swift or KMP or something like that and just using that. They're using plugins and software as a service tools just to make it easier. And I think that's where we come in as well. Thank you. We're here just around the corner. If you're interested to talk, we can chat just here, actually.